The Gilded Claw Tavern stood at the edge of known space, where three major trade routes crossed like old scars on a map. It was an ancient place, built into the hollow shell of a dead moon. For 10,000 years, travelers of every species had stopped here to rest, drink, and forget their troubles for a while. The tavern had one rule that everyone obeyed: no violence inside its walls. The Elder Wyams owned this place, and nobody was foolish enough to anger a dragon. Lyra wiped down the bar counter with a rag that had seen better days. Her copper-colored hair fell across her face as she worked, hiding the exhaustion in her golden eyes. To anyone watching, she looked like a pretty young woman in a simple serving dress. That was the point. That was the disguise. In truth, Lyra was a dragon. 312 years old, which made her barely an adult by her people's standards. Like all young dragons, she was required to spend a century in humanoid form, serving others. It was meant to teach humility. It was meant to remind them that power came with responsibility. Lyra had learned that lesson early. Too early. And it had cost her everything. She paused in her work and pressed a hand against her chest. Beneath her ribs, where her fire heart should have burned bright and strong, there was only a weak flutter. Like a candle in a storm. Like something dying. 3 years ago, she had been flying through the void between stars when she sensed them. Human ships. A whole convoy of them, carrying families and children to a new colony world. They were defenseless, slow, easy prey for the void swarm that was hunting them. Lyra had not thought about what she was doing. She had simply acted. She wrapped herself around those ships like a shield and burned. She burned brighter than she had ever burned before, turning the swarm to ash. For 3 days and 3 nights, she held the line while the human ships crawled towards safety. When it was over, her fire heart was shattered. Dragons could heal from almost anything. But a broken fire heart was different. It was the source of their magic, their power, their very identity. Without it, Lyra could not shift into her true form. She could not breathe flame. She could not fly among the stars. She was stuck in this weak, fragile human body, forever. The other dragons knew, of course. They could sense the damage in her the moment she walked into a room. Some of them pitied her. Most of them simply looked away, as if her condition was something shameful. Something contagious. So Lyra kept working. She served drinks and cleaned tables and pretended that her heart was not breaking a little more each day. What else could she do? Where else could she go? The door opened, letting in a gust of recycled air from the station outside. Lyra looked up automatically, ready to greet whatever strange creature walked through. It was a human. She blinked in surprise. Humans were rare out here, this far from their little corner of the galaxy. The elder races called them mayflies because their lives were so short. 90 years, maybe 100 if they were lucky. What could anyone accomplish in such a tiny amount of time? This human was a man, somewhere in his middle years. He had dark hair going gray at the temples and a face that had seen too much. He wore simple traveler's clothes, dusty and worn from long journeys. Nothing special about him at all. But something made Lyra look twice. It was the way he moved. Quiet and careful, like a predator pretending to be prey. His eyes swept the room once, taking in every exit, every potential threat, every shadow where danger might hide. Then he walked to an empty table in their section and sat down with his back to the wall. Lyra grabbed a menu and approached him. "Welcome to the Gilded Claw," she said in the common tongue. "What can I get for you?" The human looked up at her. His eyes were brown, warm and sad at the same time. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Recognition? No, that was impossible. They had never met before. "Just water for now," he said. His voice was rough but kind. "And maybe some information, if you have time." Information costs extra around here, Lyra replied with a small smile. It was an old joke among the servers. The human smiled back. It changed his whole face, making him look younger, more alive. Fair enough. I am looking for someone. A dragon who was injured about 3 years ago. She saved some human ships from the Void Swarm. I have been trying to find her ever since. Lyra's heart stuttered in her chest. Her real heart, not the broken fire heart. She kept her face calm through years of practice. Why are you looking for this dragon? She asked carefully. To repay a debt, the human said simply. My sister was on one of those ships. My niece too. They would be dead if not for that dragon. I want to find her and tell her that her sacrifice was not forgotten. Lyra did not know what to say. In 3 years, no one had come looking for her. No one had said thank you. She had accepted this as natural. Dragons were supposed to protect lesser beings. It was their duty, not something that deserved gratitude. But here was this human, this mayfly with his short little life, crossing the galaxy to find her. I will bring you water, she said. Because she did not trust her voice to say anything else. She walked back to the bar on shaking legs. Her hands trembled as she filled a glass. This was foolish. This was dangerous. If she revealed herself to this human, word might spread. The wrong people might learn that there was a crippled dragon working in a nowhere tavern, far from her people's protection. But still that someone had come looking for her. Someone remembered. Lyra carried the water back to his table and set it down carefully. The human was watching her with those sad, knowing eyes. My name is Marcus Chun, he said. And I think you already know why I'm really here. The door opened again before Lyra could answer. More customers. She turned to look and felt her blood freeze solid in her veins. Dragons. A whole group of them in humanoid form. But not just any dragons. Dominion. Dragons. Conquerors. Slavers. The cruelest of all her kind. And they were walking straight toward her section. The leader of the Dominion group was impossible to miss. He was tall and beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers are beautiful. His humanoid form had scales of black and gold that caught the light like jewels. His eyes were red as fresh blood. He walked like he owned every room he entered, because usually he did. His name was Lord Vorith Kex. Lyra knew him by reputation. Every dragon did. He was old, powerful, and completely without mercy. The Dominion had built their empire on conquest and cruelty, and Vorith was one of their favored sons. He had brought 6 guards with him. They spread out as they entered, blocking the nearby exits without seeming. 2. Professional. Dangerous. The other patrons in the tavern suddenly found reasons to look at. Their drinks instead of the newcomers. Vorith stopped in the middle of the room and breathed in deeply through his nose. Dragons could smell many things that other races could not. Fear, weakness, the condition of another dragon's fire heart. His red eyes found Lyra immediately. Well, he said, and his voice was smooth as silk over broken glass. What do we have here? A little copper worm, all alone and far from home. Lyra kept her face blank. She had dealt with difficult customers before. She could handle this. Welcome to the Gilded Claw, my lord, she said, bowing her head in the proper show of respect. How may I serve you? Vorith walked toward her slowly. His guards followed like shadows. With each step he took, Lyra felt the weight of his presence pressing down on her. This was old dragon magic, the kind that made lesser beings want to kneel and beg for mercy. Once, she could have resisted it easily. Now, with her fire heart broken, it took everything she had just to stay standing. Vorith stopped directly in front of her. He was close enough that she could smell the smoke and copper on his breath. He reached out one elegant hand and lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Your fire heart," he said, almost wonderingly. "It is broken, shattered. I have never seen such damage outside of a battlefield." His lips curved into a cruel smile. "How does it feel, little worm? To be so weak? So helpless?" "I manage," Lyra said quietly. Varth laughed. It was not a nice sound. "She manages," he said to his guards, who laughed on command. How inspiring. A crippled dragon serving drinks to the lesser races. Is this what we have become? He released her chin and turned away. For one moment, Lyra dared to hope he was done with her. She was wrong. Varth's tail, which he had kept hidden beneath his coat, swept out and caught Lyra's legs. She fell hard, the tray in her hands crashing to the floor. Glasses shattered. Liquid splashed everywhere. Pain shot through her knees and palms. The tavern went silent. "Clean that up," Vorath said, not even looking at her. "And bring us your best wine. Perhaps you are still useful for something." Lyra's face burned with shame as she gathered the broken pieces. Her hands were bleeding from the glass. She could feel everyone watching her, pitying her, or worse, enjoying the show. Marcus Chun had not moved from his table. She could see him from the corner of her eye. His face was perfectly still, but his hands were clenched into fists on the table. She wanted to tell him not to interfere. Vorath was a Dominion Lord. He had enough power to destroy a human without even trying. It would be like stepping on an ant. Marcus did not understand what he was dealing with. Lyra returned with the wine, walking carefully around the wet floor. She poured for Vorath and his guards with steady hands. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her tremble. Vorath took a sip and made a face of disgust. "This is swill," he announced, and threw the wine in her face. Lyra stood there, dripping, saying nothing. The wine burned in the small cuts on her hands. It ran down her face like purple tears. "Fetch something better," Vorath commanded. "And be quick about it, unless you want to learn what else I can break." She walked back to the bar. The bartender, an old rock creature named Grost, handed her a towel without a word. His stony face showed nothing, but she could see the sympathy in his crystal eyes. "You do not have to take this," he rumbled quietly. "The Elder Wyam's law protects you." "The law protects against violence," Lyra whispered back. "What he is doing is not violence. It is just cruelty. The law has no answer for that." She selected a bottle of ancient Dominion vintage from the top shelf. It cost more than she earned in a month. Perhaps it would satisfy him. It did not satisfy him. When she returned, Varth examined the bottle and nodded with approval. Then he gestured, and one of his guards stuck out a foot. Lyra tripped, the bottle flying from her hands. It shattered on the floor. Priceless wine pooled around her like blood. "Clumsy creature," Vorath said with mock disappointment. "That will come out of your wages, of course, for the next century or so." His guards laughed again. One of them kicked the broken glass toward her. "Clean it up, cripple. Use your hands." Lyra knelt in the puddle of wine and broken glass. Her eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. She would not give them that victory. She started picking up the pieces, feeling fresh cuts open on her fingers. Vorath watched her with the satisfaction of a cat playing with a wounded mouse. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I have heard interesting rumors lately about a copper dragon who threw herself away protecting human ships. Burned out her own fireheart for a bunch of mayflies." He crouched down beside her, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Was that you, little worm? Did you break yourself for those worthless creatures?" Lyra said nothing. "I think it was," Vorath continued. "And I think that makes you even more pathetic than I first believed. At least a dragon who loses her fireheart in battle has some honor. But you? You wasted yourself on vermin." He stood up and looked down at her with contempt. "Perhaps I should put you out of your misery." It would be a kindness, really. No one would miss a broken thing like you. He raised his hand. Dark energy gathered around his claws. Enough power to shatter her spine. Enough to end her life with a single blow. The tavern held its breath. Lyra closed her eyes. She thought of the human ship she had saved. The children she had protected. At least she had done one good thing with her life. At least someone would remember. "Please," she said, hating herself for begging but unable to stop the words. "Please do not strike me. I am injured." Vorath smiled and began to bring his hand down. A chair scraped against the floor. Footsteps. Quick and purposeful, and then a human hand caught Vorath's wrist in midair, stopping the blow like it had hit a wall of stone. Marcus Chun stood between them, his plain face hard as iron. "She said no," he said. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire tavern had frozen like a painting, everyone staring at the impossible thing that was happening in front of them. A human was holding a dragon's wrist. A mortal was stopping a Dominion Lord's killing blow. It should not have been possible. Humans were weak, fragile. Their bones broke easily, and their lives ended so quickly. They were nothing in the grand order of the galaxy. And yet Marcus Chun stood there, unmoved, unafraid. Vorath stared at his own trapped wrist like he could not understand what he was seeing. His red eyes slowly traveled up to Marcus's face, and for the first time, there was something other than cruelty in them. There was confusion. There was doubt. "Release me," Vorath hissed. "Release me, you insect, or I'll burn the flesh from your bones." Marcus did not release him. "No," he said calmly. "I do not think I will." One of Vorath's guards moved, drawing a plasma blade from his belt. He swung it at Marcus's back, aiming to cut the human in half. Marcus did not look. He did not need to. His free hand shot out behind him and caught the guard's arm at the elbow. There was a sharp crack, and the guard screamed, his weapon clattering to the floor. Marcus twisted, using the screaming guard as a shield, and threw him into two other guards who were charging forward. All of this happened in less than 2 seconds. Lyra watched from the floor, her mouth hanging open. She had seen warriors fight before. She had seen dragons battle in the void between stars. But she had never seen anything move like Marcus Chun was moving now. He was not stronger than the dragons. She could see that. His muscles strained against Vorath's arm, and it was clear that in a contest of pure power, the dragon would win. But Marcus was not fighting with power. He was fighting with something else. Precision, speed, knowledge. He released Vorath's wrist and stepped back, just as the Dragon Lord swiped at him with claws that could cut through starship hull. The claws missed by a hair. Marcus was already moving, ducking under the swing and driving his elbow into a spot beneath Vorath's ribs. The Dragon Lord gasped and stumbled back. His eyes went wide with shock. "What? How?" "Pressure point," Marcus explained, circling him slowly. "Dominion dragons have a cluster of nerves right below the 7th scale from the bottom. Strike it correctly, and you lose feeling in your legs for about 30 seconds. Vorath's legs buckled. He caught himself on a table, knocking drinks everywhere. His face twisted with rage and disbelief. "How do you know that?" he demanded. "That is not in any database. That is not written in any book." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only cold, patient satisfaction. "Humans study things," he said. "We watch. We learn. We remember. Your people conquered half the galaxy while we were still figuring out fire. But you never thought to keep secrets from us. Why would you? We were just mayflies. Just insects. Just footnotes in your great history." The remaining guards attacked as one. 4 of them, moving with the speed and strength of their kind. Any one of them could have torn a normal human apart without effort. Marcus was not a normal human. He moved through them like water through rocks. Every strike he made was perfect, hitting weak points that should have been impossible for an outsider to know. A palm strike to the temple that disrupted a dragon's sense of balance. A kick to the knee that targeted a joint that only existed in Dominion physiology. A thumb pressed against a nerve cluster in the neck that caused instant unconsciousness. In 47 seconds, all 6 guards were on the floor. Some were unconscious. Some were groaning in pain. None of them were getting up anytime soon. Vareth finally managed to stand, his legs shaking as feeling returned to them. He looked at his fallen guards, then back at Marcus, and real fear crossed his face for the first time. "What are you?" he whispered. Marcus straightened his dusty traveler's coat. There was not a mark on him. He had just defeated 7 Dominion dragons without taking a single hit. "I am human," he said simply. "That is all." "That is enough." Vareth's fear curdled into rage. His form began to shimmer, scales rippling beneath his skin as his true nature fought to emerge. If he transformed fully, his dragon form would fill the entire tavern. He would destroy everything and everyone inside. "I will burn this whole moon to ash," he snarled. "I will hunt down every human in the galaxy." "You will do nothing," Marcus interrupted. He held up a small device, no bigger than his thumb. "This is a dead man's switch connected to a quantum transmitter. If my heart stops beating, or if I press this button, every news network in the galaxy receives a recording of what happened here tonight. A Dominion lord tormenting a wounded dragon, beaten by a single human. How do you think your people will react to that?" Vareth's transformation stopped. The scales retreated. His face went pale. "You are bluffing," he said, but his voice was uncertain. "Try me," Marcus replied. "I have nothing to lose. Do you?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Finally, Vareth looked away. It was the smallest motion, but it meant everything. It meant surrender. It meant defeat. "This is not over," he said through gritted teeth. "I have a fleet. I have an army. I will return, and when I do, neither of you will survive." "I look forward to it," Marcus said. "Now leave, and take your garbage with you." He gestured at the unconscious guards on the floor. Vareth gathered his men, those who could still walk, dragging those who could not. At the door, he turned back one final time, his red eyes fixed on Lyra, who was still kneeling in the wine and broken glass. "Enjoy your human protector while you can cripple," he said. "He cannot save you forever." Then he was gone. The tavern remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the other patrons began to whisper among themselves. Some were looking at Marcus with new respect. Others were looking at him with fear. He had just made an enemy of the Dominion. That was not a small thing. Marcus ignored them all. He walked over to Lyra and held out his hand. "Can you stand?" he asked. Lyra looked up at him, at this strange human who had risked everything to save her, who had revealed secrets that his species must have guarded carefully for generations. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do that?" "You have just painted a target on your back. The Dominion will never stop hunting you now." Marcus smiled. This time, it was real, warm. "Because," he said, 3 years ago, a dragon did something even more foolish for my family. The least I could do is return the favor." He kept his hand extended, patient, waiting. After a moment, Lyra took it and let him pull her to her feet. The back room of the Gilded Claw was small and quiet. Grost, the old bartender, had offered it to them without being asked. He had also brought bandages, clean water, and a bottle of something strong. Then he had left them alone, closing the door softly behind him. Lyra sat on a crate, holding her wounded hands in her lap. The cuts from the broken glass were already starting to heal, but slowly. So slowly. Once such tiny injuries would have closed in seconds. Now they took hours, like she was no better than a mortal. Marcus sat across from her on another crate. He was cleaning his hands with a wet cloth, though there was no blood on them. Not his blood, anyway. He worked in silence, giving her space to think, to process what had just happened. Finally, Lyra spoke. "You knew," she said. "From the moment you walked in, you knew who I was." "What I was?" Marcus nodded. "I have been searching for 3 years. I followed every rumor, every hint, every whisper of a copper dragon who burned herself out saving human lives. The trail led here, to this tavern, to you. How?" Lyra asked. "Dragons are secretive. We do not share information with outsiders, especially not about our weaknesses." Marcus smiled slightly. "We have our ways. Humans are good at being overlooked. We are good at listening when others think no one is paying attention. And we are very, very patient." He set down the cloth and looked at her directly. His brown eyes were serious now, all traces of humor gone. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need you to answer honestly. Why did you do it? Why did you sacrifice yourself for those ships? You did not know them. You owed them nothing. By every law of your people, you had no obligation to interfere." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. No one had ever asked her that question before. Everyone had simply assumed she had acted on instinct or duty or some other noble motivation that they could understand and categorize. The truth was simpler and harder. "I saw the children," she said softly, "through the windows of the ships. Little faces pressed against the glass, watching the void swarm approach. They were so scared, so helpless. And I thought about what kind of person I would be if I just flew away, if I let them die to save myself." She looked down at her bandaged hands. "I decided I would rather be broken than be that person." Marcus was quiet. When Lyra looked up, she saw something shining in his eyes. Tears. A human was crying for her. "My niece," he said, his voice rough. "Her name is May. She was 7 years old when the swarm attacked. She still has nightmares about it sometimes. But she also has a picture that she drew. A picture of a dragon made of fire, wrapped around her ship like a blanket. She calls you her guardian angel." Lyra felt something catch in her throat. She had never thought about the people on those ships as individuals. They had been a concept, a cause worth dying for. But now she had a name, a face, a child who drew pictures of her. "I would do it again," she whispered. "Even knowing what it would cost. I would do it 1,000 times." "I know," Marcus said. "That is why I am here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. It looked like a metal card, covered in symbols that Lyra did not recognize. "This is a quantum key," he explained. "It grants access to a facility on Earth, a medical facility. Our best scientists have been working there for the past 3 years, studying dragon physiology, studying fire hearts." Lyra's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that humanity owes you a debt we can never fully repay. But we can try. We can offer you something that your own people cannot." He held out the card. "We think we can rebuild your fire heart." The words hung in the air between them. Impossible words. Ridiculous words. Fire hearts were not machines to be repaired. They were living magic, the essence of what made a dragon a dragon. Even the greatest dragon healers could not restore a shattered fire heart. "That is impossible," Lyra said automatically. "No one can. No dragon can," Marcus agreed. "But we are not dragons. We do not accept impossible. We are humans. We ask, why not? And then we spend 100 years figuring out the answer." He leaned forward, his eyes bright with something that took Lyra a moment to recognize. It was hope. Real hope. Our scientists have studied dragon biology from every angle. We have mapped the energy patterns of fire hearts. We have developed synthetic materials that can hold and channel that energy. We have run 10,000 simulations and 100 live tests. And we truly believe, that we can rebuild what you lost. Not with magic, he continued. With science. With engineering. With the stubborn refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. He smiled. Humans are good at that. Lyra stared at the card in his hand. Her heart was pounding. Her broken fire heart was fluttering weakly in her chest, as if it too understood what was being offered. Why? She asked. Why would your people do this? It must have cost fortunes. It must have taken thousands of hours of work. Why would you spend all of that on one dragon? Marcus's smile faded into something more serious. More personal. Because you taught us something, he said. When you wrapped yourself around those ships, you showed us that there are beings in this galaxy who will sacrifice everything for strangers. Beings who believe that life is worth protecting, no matter whose life it is. That lesson is worth more than any fortune. He pressed the card into her hand. Come with me, he said. Let us repay the debt. Let us show you what mayflies can do when we owe someone everything. Lyra looked at the card. She thought about the Dominion, who would be coming with warships and armies. She thought about her broken body, her fading power, her lonely existence in this nowhere tavern. She thought about a little girl named May, who called her a guardian angel. She closed her fingers around the card. I will come, she said. Marcus nodded, relief washing over his face. We should leave soon. Vareth was not lying about having a fleet. He will call them the moment he reaches a communication array. We have maybe 12 hours before this entire sector becomes a war zone. And after that? Lyra asked. What happens when the Dominion comes to Earth looking for revenge? Marcus stood up and offered her his hand again. This time, there was something dangerous in his smile. Something that made Lyra realize that humans were perhaps not as harmless as everyone believed. Then they will learn, he said. What happens when you threaten the things that humanity has decided to protect? Lyra took his hand and stood. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than despair. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she had found her place in the universe after all. 6 months passed. In that time, Lyra learned that humans were strange creatures. They slept for 8 hours every day, which seemed terribly wasteful. They needed to eat 3 times a day, and they actually enjoyed it, turning meals into social occasions full of laughter and conversation. They lived their short lives with an intensity that dragons never bothered with, cramming experiences and emotions and connections into their brief decades, like they were trying to taste everything the universe had to offer. And they were stubborn. So incredibly, wonderfully stubborn. The doctors at the facility had worked on her fire heart for months. They had failed 100 times. Each failure had taught them something new. They had adjusted, adapted, tried again. When one approach did not work, they invented a new approach. When their machines were not precise enough, they built better machines. They never gave up. They never even considered giving up. Why do you keep trying? Lyra had asked Dr. Sarah Chun one day. Marcus's sister, as it turned out. A woman with the same brown eyes and the same stubborn set to her jaw. Every other species in the galaxy would have stopped by now. Sarah had looked up from her calculations and smiled. Because you did not stop, she said simply. You did not stop burning until every last ship was safe. You did not stop even when it was destroying you. So how could we stop trying to save you? That was when Lyra finally understood what made humans special. It was not their technology, though that was impressive. It was not their intelligence, though they were cleverer than anyone gave them credit for. It was their hearts. Their foolish, generous, impossibly brave hearts. The procedure happened on a quiet morning in spring. Lyra lay on a table while human machines hummed around her. The new fire heart they had built sat in a case nearby, glowing with soft copper light. It was not made of magic. It was made of synthetic crystals and quantum circuits and materials that did not exist until humans invented them. It should not have worked. But when they placed it in her chest, when they connected it to what remained of her old heart, Lyra felt power flood through her. For the first time in years. No, not the same power, more power. The humans had not just rebuilt her fire heart. They had improved it. They had taken the blueprint of what dragons were supposed to be and asked themselves a simple question: how can we make this better? Lyra's first transformation after the procedure had brought the entire facility running. She had burst through the roof of the building and soared into the sky, laughing and crying and trailing flames behind her like a comet. Her true form was beautiful again. No, more than beautiful. She was radiant. She was alive. She was ready, because the Dominion was coming. Voreth Kex had kept his promise. He had gathered the largest fleet his people had ever assembled. 10,000 warships, each one capable of burning a planet to glass. He was coming to Earth, coming to destroy the humans who had humiliated him, coming to prove that mortals could never stand against the eternal might of dragons. He arrived on a Tuesday. Lyra remembered that detail because Marcus had laughed about it. "Of course it is Tuesday," he had said. "The galaxy always ends on a Tuesday." The Dominion fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. They expected to find a primitive world, barely capable of defending itself. They expected easy prey. Instead, they found a wall of ships waiting for them. Human ships were not beautiful like dragon vessels. They were ugly and brutal, covered in guns and armor and engines that burned too hot and too bright. They were designed by a species that had clawed its way up from the mud through 10,000 years of war against itself. They were built to survive. They were built to win. But the human fleet was not alone. There were Talaxian cruisers, their crystalline hulls singing with the music of their people. The Talaxians remembered when human doctors had cured a plague that was killing their children. There were Makani dreadnoughts, the ancient machine race who never forgot that human engineers had helped repair their corrupted code. There were Vrix hunters, small and fast and deadly, crewed by a species that humans had welcomed when everyone else had turned them away. Dozens of species. Hundreds of ships. All standing between the Dominion and Earth. And at the very front of the fleet, alone in the void, hung a dragon made of copper fire. Lyra had never felt so powerful. Her new fire heart blazed in her chest, fed by human ingenuity and dragon spirit. She was not the same dragon who had burned herself out over those colony ships. She was something new. Something better. Voreth's flagship moved forward from the fleet. A communication channel opened. "Wow," his voice crackled across space. "The cripple has learned new tricks. It does not matter. You are still one dragon against 10,000 ships. This changes nothing." "Look again," Lyra replied. She could feel Vorath's confusion as he scanned the fleet facing him. All those ships. All those species. All of them ready to fight and die for a world that most of them had never even visited. "Impossible," Voreth whispered. "These races do not work together. They have no treaties, no alliances, no reason to. They have humanity," Lyra interrupted. "They have the mayflies who helped them when no one else would. They have the insects who remembered every kindness and repaid it tenfold. They have the footnotes who rewrote the entire book." She spread her wings wide, and fire blazed from every scale. The Dominion taught the galaxy that might makes right, that the strong take and the weak suffer. But humanity taught a different lesson. They taught that kindness is not weakness. They taught that compassion builds alliances that fear never could. They taught that the smallest hand, offered in friendship, can change everything. She dove toward Vorath's flagship, trailing flames like a second sun. Today, you learned that lesson too. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Dominion fleet was scattered and burning. Vorath's flagship was a cloud of glowing debris. The would-be conqueror himself had died screaming, unable to understand how this had happened, how everything had gone so wrong. Lyra floated in the void among the wreckage, exhausted but alive. All around her, ships from a dozen species were regrouping, checking on each other, celebrating their survival. They had won. Against all odds, against the greatest military power in the galaxy, they had won. A small human shuttle approached her. Marcus Chun sat in the pilot's seat, grinning like a fool. "Not bad for a bunch of mayflies," he said over the radio. Lyra laughed. It felt good to laugh. "Not bad at all," she agreed. Later, after the celebrations had died down and the diplomats had started arguing about what came next, Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking Earth's capital city. Marcus stood beside her, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she had never seen on any other world. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild," Marcus said. "Now we reach out to other species who need help. Now we keep doing what we have always done. Being human. Being stubborn. Being kind." Lyra nodded slowly. She understood now. Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their cleverness. It was their belief that every life mattered, that every debt should be repaid, that every kindness would come back to them in ways they could never predict. They called themselves mayflies. They lived and died in the blink of a dragon's eye. But in their brief, brilliant lives, they had changed the galaxy. "I think I would like to help with that," Lyra said quietly. "If you will have me." Marcus smiled and offered her his hand. "Welcome to the family," he said. Lyra took his hand, and together they watched the stars come out, one by one, filling the sky with light. Somewhere out there, other species were learning a new lesson. A lesson about kindness. A lesson about courage. A lesson about what happens when you underestimate the smallest voices in the universe. The mayflies had taught the stars to hope. And the stars would never forget.